Story 1. I worked briefly with a psychologist whose clients were sex offenders. Their therapy was mandatory. Most seemed like normal guys but a little off. However, one gave me chills just by entering the room. I could feel him before I could see him. He made me so uncomfortable. There was a lobby and a reception area where I sat. My area was behind a security door that had to be buzzed open, and there was a partition with a few slots for paperwork. But the clients couldn't access me unless I buzzed them in. This guy would sit across the lobby, in the chair farthest from my area, and just stare at me, rubbing his palms on his knees. He never said more than a few words to me. After a few months of this, I told my boss that I couldn't stand it anymore. I started feeling really paranoid and afraid of walking to my car or being followed. And when I expressed that, my boss became very serious and asked me if I had seen the client outside of the office, anywhere at all, even just for a second. It turns out that client had been stalking and assaulting women since the 1980s, and I was his type. Story 2. Maternal grandfather framed his own daughter so she would go to jail instead of him for tax fraud. At 25 years old, she trusted her dad, and he tricked her into signing paperwork she did not understand. He ignored her crying plea to save her. Such a terrible person. Story 3. My ex-sister-in-law was extremely manipulative and molested her own son. I hate to admit it, but when she died in July due to an exploding propane tank, I was actually happy. There is so much I can say about Lisa. None of it good. Story 4. My uncle, my father's brother, is someone my mother tried to shield me from during my childhood. I'm adopted, and although she kept me away from him, she was kind enough not to speak too ill of him. She told me he loved us but was just a closed-off person. As I grew up, I learned how twisted he was. When my grandmother died, he tried to take over my dad's part of the inheritance. He worked hard for my father to divorce my mom, and once she passed away, he and his wife tried to force my dad into changing his will to benefit himself. When my dad became ill and I had to hospitalize him, he made a false complaint against me, accusing me of abusing my elderly, helpless father. This was all because I wasn't blood-related and was a person of color. I was very close to spending years in prison due to pure pettiness. To top things off, he spread a rumor during my dad's funeral that I had abducted my dad and kept them apart. That's him. Story 5. My biological grandmother sexually abused me for about 10 years. Sick how much she enjoyed it, and she absolutely loved doing it in a public setting or for photos. Story 6. The wife of my old boss would come late to work, angry and drunk, parking her Mercedes across 2 spaces, and demand everyone drop everything to help her fix some trivial issue. If anyone had anything more pressing to do, she would become furious, screaming about how it's her company. Then my boss died, and she was left in charge. She buried her head in the sand and would scream and cry about how she was going to kill herself whenever anyone asked her to do anything important, like sign bank paperwork or bring someone in to help. She didn't let any of his family attend the funeral and went into detail in the eulogy about how they got together through an affair and how people getting hurt was necessary. Then, when someone at the company, who had been by the boss's side since the beginning, was diagnosed with lung cancer, she said, and I quote, "I wish he'd hurry up and die so I don't have to give him any more sick pay." Then the business went under and we all got made redundant via email. I have no idea what happened to her. She lived by herself and had no contact with anyone, having burned every single bridge she had, even with her neighbors. I don't believe in karma in the spiritual sense, but I feel like she's living her punishment for being so vile. Story 7. A friend of a friend seemed really weird the few times I talked to him. Absolutely no emotion on his face or in his voice ever. One night, he unsettled me enough that I left my friend's house. He beat my friend nearly to death and decapitated another man that night with a claw hammer. He spent his entire trial laughing at the evidence and families in court. Story 8. My sister has stolen hundreds, if not thousands, of pain pills from my grandmother and my mom, and hundreds of dollars from everyone she knows. She has taken several things from numerous stores like Walmart or Dollar General. She's a habitual lying sociopath who cares about no one but herself. If she were thirsty, she'd sell both her kids for a drink. I could say more, but I'm tired, and trying to remember every single bad thing she did would take me at least an hour, if not longer. I try to see the good in people. When I hear of people murdering and stealing and everything else, I try to see it from their point of view. I genuinely wish we could all do and be better people. If she dropped dead right now, I would absolutely not shed a single tear. I wouldn't be happy she's gone, but at the same time, the world would be a better place if she wasn't in it. Story 9. My half-brother. I have 3 siblings who are all half-siblings, but I just call the others my brother and sister. I try to distance myself from him as much as possible. He is like 90% disowned from the family because my sister and I have made it clear we will not be attending anything he is at. He is a racist, misogynistic drug addict who steals, abuses his wife and kids, assaults people, and is a generally terrible person. He stole a car with a kid in it once. He lived with his aunt to help her since she was bedridden, but was just stealing money from her and letting her rot in bed. He has done meth, heroin, and cocaine, and was so addicted to alcohol he injected it before. My mom keeps giving him second chances and money, and it is so frustrating. Story 10. Criminal defense lawyer here. I've only met one truly evil person out of thousands of individuals whom society would consider incredibly dangerous. 95% of my clients are behind bars. He is the only client I refuse to be alone with in a room. When I first met him, it was behind glass at a correctional center for an interview. I was very grateful for that glass. He was cold, calculating, manipulative, and charming. I'll never forget his dead, yet somehow playful eyes. I was a mouse to him. To be fair, he viewed everyone as his plaything. And as his lawyer, I was no exception. I think 99.9% of all my clients could be rehabilitated and released to live safely in the community. Not him. Story 11. I worked at a behavioral health facility for juveniles. I worked on a unit specifically for kids who had some sort of sexual issue or offense. We had a kid who was 12 years old and was explicitly a sexual predator, made even worse by the fact that he was open about it. He said he had plans to get sex from one of the 16 and up kids on the unit. His reasoning was that they could get legal charges and nothing would happen to him due to the age difference. Story 12. Yes, Ms. Makos, a teacher at St. Cyril Elementary School in Pittsburgh in the 1980s and 1990s, was a truly evil person. When I was in her class, she behaved very sweetly to this poor boy who had just had to repeat 3rd grade and was understandably awkward when joining us. She would send him out of the classroom to run errands for her as though it were a special privilege. Whenever he left the room, she would read his assignments aloud to the class and make jokes about his mistakes. Then, when she heard footsteps, she'd remind us all that what happens in the classroom stays in the classroom. Of course, I reported the situation and told both my parents and the school administration. The result was no consequences for her, but I started getting sent out on errands, or in my case, not actually going and instead staying within earshot to eavesdrop. When I was gone, she would remind everyone that I took what was in the classroom to others and cannot be trusted and that no one should ever trust me. A few years later, my mom was student teaching at St. Cyril and walked past Ms. Makos' door to hear her telling the class not to trust another student for betraying them by telling their parents what happened in class. Just an awful, evil woman. Story 13. I used to manage a Staples copy center. We had an incompetent general manager who lied their way into the position, and it showed. Eventually, the regional manager decided we needed to replace her and appointed a new general manager. He decided to move one of his other general managers from another store to ours. My store was one of the highest profit stores in the company because our commercial rent was locked very close to the original rent from when the building was constructed. We are talking about needing to be open for only 2 days to cover the bills for the whole month. The new manager came in, decided he wanted a fresh start, and aimed for more profit. He launched an internal investigation, claiming widespread employee theft. He had friends in loss prevention and convinced them to find anything they could on everyone in the store. Everyone except the 2 assistant managers was fired and blacklisted from ever being employed by Staples again. I later found out that the guy was a former police officer who had been fired for unethical conduct. I didn't just find this out passively. One of his former officers, who was a member at my mixed martial arts gym, made a point of telling me about it and said, "Stay away from him. You can't trust anything he says or does." I ended up making it my personal campaign to get him removed from the company. He was finally removed, but I'm still blacklisted. Story 14. I hired a day laborer a few times for painting. People say old painters are crazy from the fumes, so I attributed his somewhat erratic behavior to that. I was driving him home one day, and he told me about two acquaintances of his who raped a woman. Although I told him I did not want to know, he had this urge to explain what they did and where it happened. Halfway through his story, he switched from third person to second person, replacing they with we. I realized he had some weird need to confess to something really evil. I dropped him off and never saw him again. Story 15. Yes, that person was my father. Without writing a novel, he was physically abusive towards me, and sexually, physically, and emotionally abusive towards my mother and sisters. One of my sisters is also my niece as a result of his grotesque belief about women and his obsession to have a son. There are arguments that could be made that there are worse people in the world, but in my mind, there's nothing worse than what my father was, a monster. I can't believe that of all the posts that I've made over the years, this is the one that gains attention. It's strange to me that my trauma is somehow entertainment to others. But I did want to answer the question honestly, to answer a few questions quickly and clearly so I don't have to repeat myself too many times. Both my parents have passed away, along with 6 of my 9 sisters. My sister/niece is one of the ones who has passed away. My extended family treats me very well, and I have a very close relationship with them. However, my remaining 3 sisters who are still in the United States refuse to speak to me. My family disowned me when I was 14 because I was gay. I'm now 37, so in all honesty, no time lost. I'm not sure how to respond correctly, as I don't think I've ever had a post that hit 500 upvotes before. Story 16. Not as bad as many of these, but it is a subtle evil that destroyed the next generation. A step-aunt was staying with us with her 2 kids, twins. They were woefully behind in all forms of math and reading, so as a 15-year-old, I took some time and worked with them and helped them read the first chapter of a real book. They both excitedly ran to their mother and read the first few pages to her, and she grabbed the book from them and screamed, "Stop it! Reading is for smart people." They were maybe 12. Story 17. My grandfather never talked much about Vietnam, but he told my mom the story of a guy he was there with that he thought was pure evil, and he was worried he was going to come back to the United States and keep killing because the guy enjoyed doing it. They were walking outside a village one day, and he just shot a girl in the face. The girl didn't look at them or say anything. My grandfather said it was out of nowhere. The guy was higher ranking than my grandfather, and my grandfather was scared of him, so he never said anything, but he regretted it for the rest of his life. He said he would see that girl's face when he closed his eyes to go to bed every night. And he said this happened all the way up until he died in his mid-70s. Story 18. My mom abused my father while he was dying. When I confronted her about it, she just blinked and said, "Yes, I'm abusing him, but he deserves it." I'm well aware of my father's faults, but he was never abusive with her, worked his entire life to support her. And then when his health failed and he couldn't work anymore, she decided he was a liability. She also refused to work at that time, when they were 3 years away from paying off the house, and just needed someone making minimum wage to make the house payment, even though we offered to get her a good-paying part-time job. They ended up losing everything. He passed, and then she died alone. Story 19. There was a kid who lived on my street. He was the youngest, and even at his early age, maybe 9 years old, there was just something wrong with him. He had these cold, dead eyes. Anything he was told not to do was like a challenge to him. Even things like, "It's good to be nice to people," were just a way to prove them wrong. I remember going to his house for his birthday. His sister came downstairs and started singing a song in front of us. He just glared at her, got up, walked over to her, ripped the lyric sheet out of her hands, told her it was rubbish, and threw it in the bin. She left in tears, and the parents went to comfort her. I said to him that was uncalled for. His reaction was to grab my throat and start trying to choke me. I laughed it off with his hands still around my throat. One of his parents came back and told him to stop and calm down, but he just kept choking me, and then it started to get tighter, and I realized, my God, he really is trying to choke me. I could see in his face it was getting screwed up like he was putting in effort to do it. His parent then yanked him off me and demanded he apologize to his sister. The party was over, and he and his parents soon moved away. A few years ago, a friend said to me, "Hey, remember that kid? He's in jail now for killing someone. Shot them." It turns out he became a drug dealer. Someone was dealing on his turf and he just went up to them and shot them. 25 years in prison. I can hardly say I was surprised. I dread to think what else he got up to.